All right, so we are looking at two chapters today. We're going to be looking at the cardiorespiratory guidelines as well as flexibility guidelines. So we're going to start with flexibility because that really should be the first thing that you're addressing when you walk through the gym door. Your client is going to have tight muscles, alterations in posture, modified length tension relationships, all these like tight areas that we really want them to work on and address through like flexibility training, right? So as we're looking at it today, if we're just sort of practicing this, right, we want to look at the physiologic changes to muscle and how that is going to alter our flexibility. We're going to look at how flexibility training can improve our posture, which is obviously huge because we want to make sure that our muscles aren't, moving the wrong way and putting us at risk for pulling a muscle. Or we also want to look at our movement patterns. We can't have proper movement patterns if we have a tight muscle on one side of the joint that basically doesn't let go, and then like another muscle that doesn't fire the way it's supposed to. Function overall, and just talk about how like flexibility just leads to a better system. And so we'll look at sort of the rationale behind flexibility training and how to incorporate it directly into our routines. So we do know that like flexibility, if we're going to sort of define this, right, and give it its own definition, it's the ability to move any joint through its complete range of motion. So if you consider like, all the various joints throughout like your body, right? Like if you consider like the ball and socket joint that is your shoulder, because it's the easiest one for me to show on camera, right? Like this needs to be able to move through like its complete range of motion. Now, its complete range of motion shouldn't necessarily be a perfect circle in all directions, I can only raise my arm up so much. It really shouldn't be able to travel like too far beyond, if we look at like we look at our shoulder joint here, it does have like this natural ridge. Oh, that's pixelated. Wow, the whole internet is pixelated today. Come on, give me a good, there we go. I need to always go to KenHub. I can always rely on their pictures. But it has this like natural ridge on it, and that's okay. That means that like, great, that's not part of the range of motion. It's not supposed to be able to go too far beyond this, which makes sense considering that would sort of peel the ball and socket out of the socket, So sure, we've got we're definitely going to see like, specific ranges of motion for all of these bones. Your knee shouldn't be able to hyperextend, beyond things. But ideally, we want to be able to move it through like its actual full range of motion, right? Like it does have a range of motion that it should be able to move through. And as we get older, we experience a little bit of like joint stiffness, right? Our connective tissue sort of loses its what we call compliance, right? It loses its ability to relax properly and allow, movement to occur. So what that results in when we do that is it decreases our proprioception, right? Remember proprioception, that's our body's ability to understand where it is in space, right? So if we lose that, or if we alter that ability to understand where we are in space, it results in postural distortions, which in the end sort of results in an injury, right? Think about proprioception as like, your nervous system has to take information in, interpret it, and take information out. So your body knows like how stiff your muscles should be because like, it's able to gauge what length the muscle is as it goes through like a specific range of motion. So if you have a muscle, let's say like, let's look at it in kind of a weird example, but we'll say like it's like, we'll use money as an example, but let's say like, I've got Marjan on one side and I've got Cyrus on the other, right? And what I need to do is I'm going to give them each like a budget, right? And I'm going to say, okay, you each have $500, right? and they're living, because I'm an investor in both of their businesses, let's say, for an example, right? Like there's an odd example, but like so if I'm like an investor and I need to, and I give this like yearly investment of $500, right? And Marjan comes back to me and is like, hey, just so you know, here are the numbers for what I spent this year. That's how I use that $500 investment. Great. Same thing happens sometimes, right? So like now what's happening is like information's coming in, and then I'm going to interpret it and look at the numbers and be like, great, that's about with what it should be, and and then I send information back out in response. But if one of them like just decides to like start altering the information, right? Like let's say like one of them starts saying like, oh, you know what? Like I kind of went through that $500 a little quickly. Maybe I need a little bit more money this time, right? Well, the information coming in is not good anymore. It's altered information, right? So that means that like maybe my response is like, oh, wow, I guess you need more. Great. Well, here you go. Here's a little bit more, right? Or if like the information's bad, or it's like, it's like, you know what? I saved a lot of money. It's like, oh, well, you don't really need a full $500 then. And so then I give the wrong stuff out, right? So that's true of kind of anything, right? Like if we get bad information coming in, bad choices are going to go out, right? Or bad information is going to go out. That's what happens in our proprioception. Remember, like your proprioception's sort of controlled by these like muscle spindles and these Golgi tendon organs, right? The muscle spindle is telling your brain how long your muscle is, right? It senses the length of the muscle. And you've got your Golgi tendon organ, which is sensing the tension of the muscle. So if the length of the muscle gets altered, maybe there's some scar tissue there or something like that. Maybe the nervous system is just, or maybe the muscle is just sort of hyperactive, overactive, right? It's sending a signal to the brain saying, hey, I'm at full length. I can't stretch out any further because the muscle, is basically lying, right? It's altering the information. So what'll happen is that's going to alter your length tension relationships. Your nervous system will then send a signal to that muscle and have it basically contract 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So then we see that altered length tension relationship situation where, this muscle saying, no, I can't go any longer, even though like the reality is like, this is the same muscle in the same picture here. This is just what would happen if it was overactive. So this muscle is like, no, I can't possibly stretch out any further anymore, right? So it stays at this shortened length here, right? Meanwhile, this muscle on the other side of the joint has to respond by being like, oh, well, I guess you can have some of my length, right? And so it sort of stretches out, right? And now we've got this really bad situation where, we're dragging our skeletal system around in a length that really shouldn't be it, right? So your body understands where it is in space. It has length tension relationships, and it uses those length tension relationships to understand body position. So what will happen is we alter our proprioception. We lose our ability to understand what position our body is in when we screw up our length tension relationships. And what that does is it messes up our balance, it leads to all kinds of problems. Seniors often experience altered length tension relationships. They'll often get a little stiffer. It's just kind of part of aging, right? And that changes our gait mechanics. It changes our ability to walk because like we lose our proprioception, right? We have less balance, we have less coordination because our body can no longer truly understand what position it's in versus what position it's sort of supposed to be in, right? Does that make sense, everybody? Is that concept sort of tracking? I got a little lost in that analogy, so I want to make sure you guys are still with me.
I have a question. Is there any way we can stop it, even though if they're aging or
the proprioception part, yeah, absolutely, there's a way we can stop that, by remaining like mobile, flexible, and pliable. That's a great way to sort of stop that proprioceptive loss. Now, the sort of stiffness that comes along with aging, that's a little bit harder. But one of the ways that we do it is by by moving around. But like if you talk about like, we've sort of looked at physiologically why we get a little bit stiffer as we get older. Some of that is just tissues sort of breaking down over time. Blood vessels get a little bit thinner, therefore they don't deliver as much blood, therefore tissues don't repair as quickly. So that's kind of part of it, as it breaks down. But again, remaining nice and flexible is key here. Another thing is that like as we get older, we're sort of programmed. If we look at a muscle, let's just see like muscle and tendon anatomy. If we look at our the difference between like a muscle versus a tendon, I guess this works. You can kind of see like these are two different structures. Like your muscles end in tendons, but like what a tendon is basically just like connective tissue that kind of feeds in and grabs all the individual fibers. So imagine like kind of a spider webbing that on one side is feeding into and sort of like threading itself into all the holes of the bone and grabbing the bone. And then like another side that's like grabbing all the individual strands of muscle, right? Like it's not like a muscle cell is this long and then ends in a tendon. That's not really how it works. It's like the tendon is a separate tissue that grabs and threads itself through the muscle. Like, if you had a whole bunch of rubber bands and you clasp them together like this and then took a hot glue gun and just poured it, the hot glue gun would sort of represent the tendon there. It just kind of threads itself in and grabs all the stuff. As we get older, though, that connective tissue, which doesn't repair very quickly, right? Because this doesn't have a lot of blood going to it. That's why we draw it in white, just gets a little bit stiffer, So we can sort of stem the dysfunction. We can sort of like remove the dysfunction here by keeping the muscle section nice and pliable, right? If we can keep this section like from getting too much scar tissue and too much stiffness and all these problems, right? We can maintain that full range of motion. And then because we have we've got full range of motion, your body goes, oh, I know what position I'm in. I'm in the same position I've been in for 60 years. I know how to move properly,
Okay.
Yeah. So and let's just kind of go out of like the senior approach here and just let's look at like our standard clients, right? I mean, like our standard everyday clients are going to have alterations in posture too. They're going to have aches and pains and altered movement patterns, all because of like stiff muscles in one way or another. So what ends up happening when we have like a stiff muscle, right, is that your body will find the path of least resistance during some type of movement pattern, right? Like your body's going to find a way to kind of get the job done, right? Remember how the other day we were talking about how tight lat muscles, right? When we met up in person, we talked about this a lot. We've got a client whose arms fall forward, right? They can't necessarily keep their arms all the way up. So we'll often see a low back arch in response to that. And that seems kind of weird because you're like, what does my low back have to do with like what's going on in my shoulder joint? But what happens is like, if I go over here, right? If I can only raise my arms to here, but I'm trying to listen to my trainer. My trainer said, hey, I want you to put your arms all the way up overhead. But I can't get them any higher than this. What I might do is I might arch my back overhead. And now it kind of seems like I've got my arms going all the way up overhead, right? Like I'm fooling myself and fooling everybody else with the illusion that I raised my arms perpendicular to my ears. But in reality, what happened is I just kind of arched my back a little bit. I kind of changed the angle of my head and my arms together without really having to take any extra stretch on my lat. So what I did when I did that is called relative flexibility. Okay. So relative flexibility is the body finding the path of least resistance during some type of movement pattern. So all of these postural distortions that we've been looking at, as we've seen, the knees cave in, the feet turn out, right? As we've sort of looked at all these overhead squat postural distortions or static postural distortions, all of those are examples of relative flexibility. It's like, yes, you're flexible because you were able to get like the job done, kind of. You know, you got your arms up, sort of, right? But you did it by sort of cheating, right? It's like it's you're flexible relative to this altered approach, this approach that, you know, really is not necessarily how we are designed to move. You know, we found a way to sort of get lucky and move through the range of motion, not in a way that we're supposed to. So your body finds a way to move that's altered from the way it was really sort of designed, right? A good example is like, let's say your client is trying to squat and their feet turn out, right? Their feet externally rotate, right? So because they are experiencing limited dorsiflexion, right? Remember, they can't pull their toe back this way properly. Okay, so let's take a look at what this means. If I go to NASM overhead squat solutions table, you know, that table that we always pull up, right? Let's take a look right here at a client whose feet turn out. Okay, so we're looking right at this first column here, and we see our probable overactive muscles are going to be the soleus, the lateral side of the gastrocnemius, and the biceps femoris short head. So if we look at all three of those muscles here, right? If we say the let's look at the gastrocnemius. Pull all these up here. Let's do this one actually. No, that's because it's showing the medial side. Well, you know what? We'll do that side just because we'll do this picture. Good, yeah. Let's look at the soleus. Oh, you know what? There we go. I've got both my soleus and gastrocnemius in one picture. Love that. And let's look at the biceps femoris short head. Long head. There we go. Okay. So here we go. Here we can see our various muscles that we're sort of talking about here. So we got a client again whose feet turn out, right? They're trying to squat, they can't squat properly, so their feet turn out, right? Why did their feet turn out? Well, chances are this gastrocnemius muscle might be a little bit tight. So this is the lateral side of it here on the outside. This is the medial side of it here. And particularly the lateral side tends to be a little bit more often tight than the other. And then underneath this muscle, we can see there's our soleus, right? So both of those muscles are plantar flexors, right? When this muscle pulls, it pulls the heel bone up like this, which drops the ankle down like that, and you raise up to your toes, right? You point your toe away. So that's how these muscles are actually sort of shortening and allowing this to happen. Then we've got our biceps femoris's short head here, right? Now, as we're looking at the short head, and this is kind of weird, but they're showing the same picture twice here. Like this is, you know, the same muscle, you know. Particularly the one we're kind of paying attention to, right, is right here. Like this is all the muscles together. There's the medial hamstring. And here's our biceps femoris. So let's just scroll over to the side here, right? This little guy right here, this hidden muscle in the back, that's really the one that's kind of responsible for this. Because if you look, and don't get me wrong, like all of your hamstrings kind of affect your calf muscles, you can see, but they all have like, you know, where these muscles originate, your hamstrings insert, right? And particularly the big bad guy here is this one right here, this biceps femoris short head, right? So you can see, like, look at how, like, from right here, middle of the bone, and it runs down, a little shorter than the long head, right? And it runs down and grabs this fascia back here that is connected to like the soleus, right? So like this muscle is running down and it grabs right here. So it shares like this big line with the soleus. And then the you know, this is the, you know, lateral gastrocnemius would be there as well. You can't see it because it's kind of covered up here, right? But this is the other leg, right? There's the fibula. So the lateral gastrocnemius would run up and it would grab right here. So all that fascia that's in the back of the knee is all sort of connected. And when these muscles all get tight, and they all start pulling, right? These two are the main, like these are really doing like a lot of plantar flexion, right? But even the biceps femoris, like if it pulls, it might pull on some of the fascia that tightens these two muscles up and even cause, be related to a little bit of that plantar flexion. So what we know about a client whose feet turn out is that they're probably pretty good at plantar flexion. They're pretty good at pointing their toe away. What they're not so good at is dorsiflexion. So this still hasn't really necessarily explained why their feet turn out during a squat, right? Well, remember, if we look at what a squat is when it pulls, when you are shortening a muscle, you're going into triple extension, right? You are extending, right? You can see he's doing a squat jump. That's a really good example of sort of what happens in a squatting action, right? But down here, he's in dorsiflexion, which is really what we're looking at here, right? His toes kind of coming back this way, right? He's in knee flexion, he's bending his knee, and he's in hip flexion. So we call a squat, we call it a triple extension movement because we always name stuff after when the muscle is shortening, right? When it's pulling. So when the muscle, all three of these muscles pull, right? We get plantar flexion, right? We get knee extension, we get hip extension. But let's just take a look at the ankle dorsiflexion during a squat. So when you squat, your knee has to travel forward. Look at how sharp this angle is here, right? If I just kind of take this over to paint, we'll go ahead and take a look at the angle here, right? Let's see this client. Let's see this angle here. Let's go. Can you see yellow? Yeah, yellow works great. All right. So I'm gonna, his ankle is probably about here, and I'll draw that out to the edge of his toe there. And then if we draw another angle from here that travels up his knee, right? Look at how sharp that angle is, right? Pretty darn sharp. Versus like over here, he's sort of staying very upright, right? If I look at this barely goes down, and then this comes basically straight up, right? So now look at these two angles side by side. Let me pull this guy a little bit closer to himself. You over here. Look at these angles side by side. Apparently, I don't know how to use a mouse today. Click. Do you see that? Look at how sharp this angle is versus how like this is practically 90 degrees, right? That's a huge difference when you consider that like it's going to travel all the way up the kinetic chain. Now, in this example, rather than his feet turning out, what this guy's doing instead is he's excessively leaning forward. See how like you can see him lean like crazy? Yeah, what's up, Marjan? Question.
These two pictures, do they have like arch in their back? So we have to have arch in the back, or
he does have a little bit of arch over here because like clearly this guy is actually a very good squatter. Like you can see he's great over here. So he is arching a little bit. We're not paying attention to that right now because we're just looking at the ankle. But yeah, that's a good catch. I mean, he definitely is kind of arching here. This is great. Like this is super ideal. I imagine he's doing that because like this is a very unnatural way for him to move. So he's trying to like pull attention to the ankle here. And he's probably just not paying attention to any of this. But like this is meant to kind of show like what we're really looking at, right? Is like just pay attention to the ankle here, right? You can really see he's got this like not very sharp angle here. So a lot of times when what he's simulating is a client who cannot dorsiflex, right? If you aren't able to pull your toes up this way, you're going to have a really flat angle. And what that'll result in is you have to find another way to sort of squat without losing your balance, right? So he doesn't lose his balance if he dumps his chest forward, right? He can't drop his hips down. He has to dump his chest forward. That's another reason he's probably got like a little bit of extra arch there. So he's excessively leaning forward in this example. We can tell he's excessively leaning forward if we sort of draw a line, from hip. If we draw a line from his hip that travels out his shoulders, and we draw another line from here to here, right? See how those lines are parallel? That's an ideal squat. That's perfect. Whereas this version, these lines are going to intersect. That's an excessive forward lean. So that's how we can actually spot that. So here's it. We're not talking about excessive forward lean today. I mean, we're talking about all altered posture. But this example here, what I want to look at is this angle, right? I'm trying to pay attention to this angle right here. This is like 90 degrees, right? That's not awesome. This is supposed to be like 50 degrees. I don't know if it actually is. I don't have a protractor, but you know, this is what we want. We want like a really, sharp angle, because that shows us that we can lean forward. Now, if you can't do that sharp angle, your body will find some other way to get you to squat. In this example, the way his body found some other way to get the job done is he excessively leaned forward. In some clients, the way that they'll find a way to kind of get the job done is sometimes they'll arch they'll round their back. That's not good, right? They'll lean forward. That's the one we're sort of looking at here. Or they'll turn their feet out, right? What they'll do is their body will just go, hey, I can't, the toes are like, I can't go this way. So what they do instead is they just rotate like this in response. So the excessive foot turn out during a squat, if they can't keep their toes forward, the reason why is because the soleus and the lateral side of the gastrocnemius, those two major calf muscles, they will not let go to allow dorsiflexion, because dorsiflexion has to happen during a squat. If you forget everything I've said for the last 10 minutes, just remember that. Dorsiflexion, the toe has to be able to come. I'm just going to remove all of my lines here, right? The toe has to be able to come up this way. If you forget everything I say, this is the thing to remember. Your toes come up because your shin comes down, right? And we get a sharp angle. If you can't do that, your body will find some other way to do it, right? What it'll do is it'll probably turn the feet out, or you'll end up leaning forward, or sometimes you get a low back round. There's a lot of things that can happen with tight calves. But the example we're seeing in the PowerPoint here, right? If your client experiences limited dorsiflexion, if the toes can't come back, instead it goes, no, I'll just turn this way. And now the calf muscles don't have to stretch. And some other muscle does in response. That is like, yes, you squat, like you squatted all the way down, you kind of did it, right? But we cheated. So that's why we call it relative flexibility. We got the job done, but we didn't do it the way we're really supposed to, which now certain things are going to experience like way more stress, right? In the feet turn out example, the knees are going to grind. That's going to cause some serious problems there. So we're seeing tight, and this I'll bring this over to paint it as well, right? We're seeing tight muscles in overactive muscles. I'll label this. We'll call this let's go like this. Put this down here. And we'll label this the feet turn out. This is the example we're looking at here. We got a client whose feet turn out, right? Our probable overactive muscles, okay, on this side of the joint are going to be the lateral gastrocnemius, soleus, and biceps femoris, particularly the short head, right? And then this should be much smaller text. Holy crap. Let's go like that. So that's sort of like what we see on one side of the joint. Now on the other side of the joint, the underactive muscles, which isn't our focus today. We're mostly looking at like flexibility as our example. So we're paying attention to the overactive stuff, but our underactive muscles are just going to be a lot of antagonists or a lot of synergists to those muscles we were supposed to use. So the lateral gastrocnemius, right? So we're going to see the medial gastrocnemius instead, right? So we're going to see the medial. So the other side of the calf that would have, pulled the toe back this way is turned off. It's underactive. It's being shut down by its antagonist. Or we'll see the medial hamstring, right, being shut down. And then we see a bunch of knee stabilizers here. The gracilis, sartorius, and popliteus. Right? These are all sort of underactive, right? These are muscles that aren't contracting enough. We're mostly looking at overactive stuff today because we're talking about flexibility, and we stretch out our overactive stuff. But there we go. This is what we're seeing in a client whose feet turn out. If you look at your table in your book and it says probable overactive, probable underactive, this is really what we're looking at here, right? So there's our example of relative flexibility. It's like, yeah, I can squat, right? But that's like me saying, like, let's say I need to pick something up, right? And I can pick things up by like squatting, right? I could squat down to get something, right? Let's say something's here, right? I could do this, right? There we go. I squat to do it. But what if like I'm really tight? What if I've got like, I'm going to give you a really extreme example here. What if I'm so tight in some of my hips, I literally can't move? So then I'm like, my trainer's like, all right, we're going to do 15 squats. I'm like, okay. And I do that. Right? Am I squatting right now to you guys? Does that look like a squat to you? I don't think so. But like, if I've got like so many tight muscles on my right side that like they just fire all the time. I got so many weak muscles on my left side that like they never let go. Those tight muscles. I just flip my examples. If I got so many tight muscles on my right side that won't let go, and I've got so many weak muscles on my left side that won't fire properly, then what happens is I did this weird rotation thing, when I did that squat. And so like I didn't move through a squat. I did something relative to me, That's what we call that relative flexibility. So your feet turning out is a good example of relative flexibility. Excessive forward lean is a really good example of relative flexibility. The low back arch is a really good example of relative flexibility. These are all postural distortions where the body's finding a way to get the job done, even if that's not how it's meant to move. How are we doing, guys? Any questions on any of that? This is we definitely need to understand this if we move forward through any of the other stuff. Rest of you guys feeling good as well? Oh, Danny, I didn't even say hi to you. Good morning, by the way.
Hey, good morning.
So sorry.
It's okay, no worries. I know I'm late.
Oh, no. All right. Man, if that's not like I'm gonna go full boomer right now. But if that's not like an example of just like being conditioned to like, notifications pop up and you click them without even thinking, I don't know what is. All right. So now, if we look at this here, this is the joke I always make, right? When we look at our overactive versus underactive muscles, what do we do to the overactive stuff? We stretch them. Right? We'll put a little exclamation point there. This is our list of stretch them muscles, right? And over here, this is our list of strengthen them. Right? There's the muscles we need to freaking work on. So like, that's how we're going to fix this posture. How do we reverse aging? Can't really reverse aging, but how do we reverse the negative effects of aging? That. So flexibility training is usually included in the warm-up portion of a workout, okay? And it's going to consist of self-myofascial release. That's the foam rolling. It's using lacrosse balls or Theracanes, tiger tails, things like that. And, the actual stretching technique. Now, there are obviously more stretching techniques than what we generally tend to think of, right? We think of stretching, we think of this. Like we think of this like big, long 30-second hold, right? Yeah, that is a type of stretch, but there's other techniques out there. There's active isolated stretches where we'll actually stretch for maybe 1 to 2 seconds and then relax, and then another 1 to 2 seconds and then relax. That way we're contracting our muscle on the other side of the joint, right? The big benefit there is I'm sort of addressing both sides of this at the same time. Like active isolated stretching is great because like, yeah, I am directly stretching, this stuff over here, 100%. But in order to stretch it, you know how I'm doing it? I'm contracting this stuff over here. So I'm actually addressing both sides of my dysfunction simultaneously. It's great. Oh my gosh, that's a really good technique, right? So those are our active isolated stretches we're going to look at today. And then we've got dynamic stretches where, now I'm sort of hacking my nervous system, which is a weird sentence. But what I mean by that is like, now I'm basically contracting super hard on one side of the joint, like this way. And then my body is actually responding by wanting to bounce back that way. Right. And that's kind of one of the benefits to like, that's ballistic stretching. Or dynamic stretching might actually contract this muscle even harder to draw this other muscle through its full range of motion. So we're looking at these two sides of our joint, right? So for the purposes of program design, NASM has taken these different various flexibility techniques and it has organized them using the OPT model. So we've talked about the OPT model plenty of times, right? But it's this, it's the staircase, right? It's NASM's approach to program design with this sort of like staircase here. Now, we're going to be talking a lot about like the levels for the next few days. We're going to be looking at the stabilization level, the strength level, and the power level. Now, obviously, there are phases over here as well. But in the strength level, all of these phases in terms of your exercise selection, your exercise choices, it's going to be the same. So we really only have to look at these until we get into like sets and reps and tempo. Then, yes, stuff will change over here. And that's also only for resistance training, like strength training, right? Yes, sets and reps and tempo and stuff will be over here. But for now, all we have to do is look at these three levels here, because that's going to inform our choices of which ones I pick. Do I pick the big, long, super long, like the traditional stretch that we all think of, where I pull something over and I just hold it and, I look for 30 seconds and then 30 seconds later I can relax, right? And then do another 30 seconds. Do I do that version of a stretch, or do I go, 1, 2, and then relax, and like 1, 2, and then relax? Or do I do like, head circles, right? Which stretch is best? Well, there's no real best. It doesn't really work that way. They each do different things. So what's great about like these different techniques is they pair very well with other things in these levels. Now, today is the first day, so that's not always really clear. But like as we continue going through the rest of our program design class, we're going to see other things, right? We're going to see like, the resistance section, for instance, like in the stabilization level, when it comes to your strength training, you do low intensity, about 50 to 70% of your 1 rep max, which means if you're doing that, well, then you're going to do a high number of repetitions, which is about 12 to 20 repetitions. Which means you don't really have to do that very many sets because you've got a high number of repetitions. So you're gonna do 1 to 3 sets. All the rules kind of fit together, right? They're all complementing each other. That's why this is a level, and this is a level, and this is a level. So which stretch is best? Whatever type of stretch complements the rest of the things you're doing in the workout. We're trying to, play to our strengths here. We're trying to do all the things that kind of fit together really well, right? And that's what we are sort of building. Open the cardio one. That's sort of what we're building as we go through this. So when we're looking at flexibility training, right, this is included in the warm-up portion of the OPT template as we're looking at our sort of like way to build this. And I will actually, you know what? Here's my version. I do want to just show you guys. You go to nasm.org and you want to download this yourself, all you do is go down to trainer resources, go down to downloads, and then right here, good Lord, where is it? Programming. Where is the word programming? Ah, there it is. Right here, here's your program template, right? Theirs looks a little bit different than mine because I find it a little bit harder to use because it just doesn't have as many spaces as I want. So I like my little modified version a lot better. But here you can see this is the way we write our workouts, right? So the warm-up section, is where we're going to put some flexibility, and we're also going to put cardio as well. So I'm going to use mine because it's actually, I can actually edit it on the computer here. Zooming in a little bit. So flexibility training is where, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try to get the muscles that are really tight. Since we can't move through that range of motion the way we're supposed to, with this tight muscle firing the wrong way, I can't do a squat properly if I haven't stretched out those muscles. If I haven't turned this guy off, I'm not gonna be able to move through that full range of motion. He's gonna keep firing, right? And I can't get this guy turned on unless I get this guy to let go. So that's the very first thing we do. That's what we address in the warm-up section. As we're looking at this, we are going to break this down into 3 major categories, right? We've got the stabilization level, we've got the strength level, and we've got the power level. Now, in the stabilization level, right? Go back to our little staircase here. You're going to be applying this as corrective flexibility. Now, the way I like to tell people this is I like you to think of these 3 levels here as tool bags, okay? So, if I were an electrician, I'd have a tool bag with a bunch of electrician stuff in it, right? If I were a woodworker, I'd have a toolbox with a bunch of woodworking tools in it. And if I were a plumber, I'd have a bunch of plumbing stuff, right? 3 very different, types of home, construction and home repair and stuff, right? 3 very different tool bags, 3 very different toolboxes. So that's what I want you to think of here as well, right? There is no best type of stretch. It just depends on which toolbox you want to use for whichever tool you're using. If I try to use a monkey wrench, which is a plumbing tool, on my light switch, I'm probably gonna have a bad day. So the first one we're going to look at, if we've got clients who are in their first month of training, they're probably going to start in the stabilization level, right? This is our foundation, right? We got to build a foundation of good, proper movement patterns and mobility, which we are going to do in the stabilization level through corrective flexibility. So corrective flexibility is the tool bag, and it's the tool bag that's responsible for it's the type of flexibility training that improves your joint range of motion, and it's utilized to correct postural distortions. So when it comes to a really tight muscle, corrective flexibility is probably the best tool bag for getting that muscle to fully relax through a full range of motion. Okay, so this is probably the technique that works the best. And the reason why we've talked about before, you guys will remember when I mentioned autogenic inhibition, right? I wonder if I can find a good picture. I never have that great of images on autogenic inhibition. Yeah, it's all just it's kind of just stretch reflexes. Which is not really what I'm looking for. So autogenic inhibition, let's just kind of walk you guys through this again one more time. If we look, no, the internet has nothing but pixelized images. Okay, if we look at this, right, you can see here's our agonist-antagonist situation. This is the biceps and the triceps here. And you can see, right, here are our biceps on one side, right? Here's our triceps on the other, okay? So biceps, triceps, right? And it's because when the arm is straight, the bicep is stretched out, the tricep is contracted. When the elbow is bent, the bicep is contracted and the tricep is stretched out. So these muscles here are reciprocating one another, okay? This is an example of when this lets go so that when this lets go so that this can contract. That's reciprocal inhibition. This muscle is reciprocating the other one. We're talking about autogenic inhibition. Now, autogenic inhibition is where if you stretch it, if you put tension on this muscle here, right? Let's say I put tension usually near the Golgi tendon organ. So I might put pressure here, or I might just pull the muscle apart end to end, which is going to put pressure on both sides of the tendon, right? So if I pull a muscle apart, right, it's going to experience pressure on both sides, which is going to make the muscle want to contract back the other way, right? The muscle doesn't want to tear in half. So it's like, you're pulling me apart. So what do? Ugh, you pull back this way. You resist that pulling, right? That's what happens during a stretch, which you can feel, right? When you're stretching, you're like, oh God, that's stiff. You know, that's the muscle being like, no, and it's trying to pull back, right? If we static stretch a muscle, we do this big, long pulling apart of the muscle, right? What's going to happen is the muscle is going to want to pull back the other way, right? And so it's like quivering. You'll feel that when you're stretching sometimes, right? You kind of feel that quiver. You're just like, right? So it's resisting. Now, what'll happen is if you can hold that for about 30 seconds or so, if you can maintain that pressure, and it could be through a foam roller, you could be putting the pressure on with like a foam roller or a massage, right? You can just put pressure on and just poke and hold, right? Or poke and hold, right? Or if you're just stretching and you hold and you maintain that pressure for 30 seconds, eventually what'll happen is your nervous system will say, this isn't working. The pulling back in the opposite direction thing is not the solution. Safest thing to do right now is to give up and let go. So then the muscle decides safest course of action is to fully relax. So what will happen is your Golgi tendon organ, a little sensory receptor that lives in our tendon, sends an inhibitory signal over to the muscle spindle, and says, hey, let go, shut up. You know, like just let it go. And so then all of a sudden the muscle relaxes back to full length because it's being inhibited here. Now that's great if we are trying to improve range of motion. But what did I just say happens? We're kind of inhibiting the muscle. We're turning the muscle off, right? And so if we turn the muscle off, unfortunately, that means it's not going to be able to contract quite as well when we get to the gym floor. You know, it's not gonna be able to contract very well when we get into like our strength training and stuff. This is why people have sort of misinterpreted this over the years, but you'll hear people say you shouldn't stretch before you work out because it makes you weaker. I hear that all the time. That's not, I hear seeing YouTube videos, people mention on Instagram, like you know, when you're watching fitness stuff, you hear people say all the time, like, don't stretch before you work out. Stretching makes you weaker. Stretching, you know, does this, does that. Autogenic inhibition definitely does. Static stretches, long, slow hold stretches inhibit your muscle, which means that muscle is not going to be very strong. So if I'm doing like, let's say like, some pull-ups, right? And I go and I do like a big long child's pose, right? Where I'm stretching out my lat and I just hold it for like a full like 30 seconds or maybe even like a minute, right? Now my lat is a little groggy because it's being turned off, it's being inhibited, right? And so if I'm going to go do pull-ups that day, I might find that I have kind of a hard time. Now that's not always true. If the muscle's really, really, really tight, that's going to lead to weakness. So then if you can restore that range of motion, actually you'll get more strength out of it. But this whole strength thing only applies to the very upper limits of your strength. So we're talking like 75% of your 1 rep max, 80% of your 1 rep max, 90, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. The heavier you're lifting, the less likely it is you want to do a big, long static stretch hold because that is going to limit your strength. But what if I'm not lifting that heavy today? What if I'm doing high repetition? Then if that's the case, guys, static stretch away. It doesn't matter if you turn the muscle off and lose a little bit of strength. You're only affecting the top 30% of your 1 rep max, which if you're lifting 70% or below your 1 rep max, static stretches really aren't going to have hardly any effect on the strength output of your muscles because you're not tapping into that strength. Oh, well, guess what? Take a look at NASM's rules here. When you're doing static stretches, which I just got done saying, you know, it loses your strength. You don't want to do it if you're lifting heavy. Do we lift heavy in stabilization? No. We lift at about 50 to 70% of your 1 rep max. And you guys will learn that in a few days. I mean, most of you guys in here already know that. But we look and we see that it's 50 to 70% 1 rep max, which means it's not really going to be affected by static stretches. And that's why these rules kind of pair together. So our priority, our foundation that we're building on, is to prioritize being able to move through a full range of motion. And so we're going to do static stretches. Static stretches are going to turn our muscles off, yeah. But like, we're going to target the overactive muscles. We're going to target all of our muscles in general. I'm not static stretching something that's already loose. I'm static stretching something that's tight, right? So SMR focuses on the neural and fascial systems. We alleviate those myofascial trigger points by, rolling something out, right? Or by pressing on it and getting the nervous system to let go. Autogenic inhibition, right? It decreases the neural drive to the muscle. So what we do is we have to hold that tender spot for about 30 seconds. Autogenic inhibition doesn't really kick in unless you hold it long enough. That takes about 30 seconds. So not all senior clients are going to be able to foam roll. So a foam roller, you have to hold your whole body weight up. It's not very comfortable, but it doesn't mean that they can't do self-myofascial release. Doesn't mean they can't do SMR. They can use a Theracane, this little guy here. Right? It's a little knobber. These are $20, by the way. Get one. They are great. It's a really good tool to have. I use a massage gun, although I think it's a little violent for most like senior clients. I use a tiger tail. This little like foam rolly stick here, or I can use like a lacrosse ball on the wall. There's a lot of other tools out there other than just the freaking foam roller where you have to hold yourself up. So senior clients, yeah, maybe they'll use those instead. But like the nice thing is like certain foam rolling tools out there. I say foam rolling, sorry, certain myofascial release tools out there help us get into these hard to reach areas, and that's great. So our rules for how to do this, if that's what we're going to focus on these tight muscles, we want to do it 1 to 2 times per muscle group, probably. So 1 to 2 sets. 30 to 60 seconds. I'm going to write 30 seconds here because that's actually what it says in your book. If your muscle's being really stubborn, you could do even longer. There's even like a specific form of yoga. What's that freaking type of yoga called? What yoga style super vinyasa, hatha, iyengar, yin. So yin yoga is like super slow paced compared to like other yoga types, and they'll hold poses for 4 minutes sometimes. So imagine like stretching your freaking hamstring for just 4 straight minutes. It's a good way to get it to let go. It really is. It's a good way to turn that freaking muscle off. NASM's gonna say 30 seconds, 30-second minimum. Okay. So you're gonna put pressure on there for 30-second minimum and try to get it to let go. And then once you've done that and you've sort of like felt that discomfort be released a little bit, right? Now we can follow it up with some static stretches, right? Now we've untied the knots in our muscle. So now we can lengthen them out and do like a big, long static stretch, right? So like a low force, long duration hold that's going to take advantage of that autogenic inhibition. Okay. That's our static stretching. So the rules for static stretching and the rules for foam rolling are the same. 1 to 2 sets, 30-second holds each. Big thing to remember here, guys, do not bounce. God, you see people do that stretch, right? And they'll hinge and they're stretching out, and then they do this, right? Do not freaking do that. That actually increases the tension in your muscle, because like your nervous system goes and it contracts all three, every time you bounce, which is actually what we want in a dynamic stretch. But like, again, we're trying to static stretch here. That will decrease range of motion by increasing muscle activity. Do not do that. I know we all want to get, if you can't do it necessarily, you see those clients, they all want to touch their toes and they're like, right? It's like, oh God, no. So that is not how we do that. So let's take a look here. Let's take a look at how we would write sort of an example program here. Here's a little flexibility template for a client in the stabilization level, right? So here's a routine that I sort of wrote that we can do with a client who's in the first level of training. They're in stabilization, right? So let's say it's January 1st. We're going to go through January, February, March, April, May. 5 months of training, 5 months of the OPT, right? We're going to do one phase every single month. This is Bob. Bob's a senior client. He wants to get better at golf, and he's got really tight calves and really tight hip flexors. I did the overhead squat on him. He's got a feet turn out, and he's got an anterior pelvic tilt, or he's got an excessive forward lean, and either way, he's got really, really, really tight calves, really tight hip flexors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to foam roll his calves. And I'm going to foam roll his hip flexors. I'm going to SMR his calves, SMR his hip flexors. And I'm going to do static stretches to finish that up. Why am I doing static stretches? Well, let's go back to our little flow chart here, right? He's in his first month of training, which means he's in stabilization. So the tool bag that I grab is my corrective flexibility tool bag. What are the tools inside? SMR and static stretches. Okay, so that's one set is what I chose for Bob. I could have done 1 to 2. I'm going to do 30 seconds each. I'm going to do a static calf stretch, kneeling hip flexor stretch, and then I gave him a supine erector spinae stretch as well. He's got kind of a tight. Oh, okay. I don't know why I did this. Yeah, he's an anterior pelvic tilter. So we would see tight erector spinae. We don't foam roll the erector spinae though. So I didn't put that on here. So there's 3 stretches that we're going to follow up. So he's got a tight low back. He's got tight hip flexors. He's got tight calves. There we go. And those are what I'm foam rolling first and stretching second. Do I have to foam roll first? Not necessarily, but it does make it more effective. That's why I didn't necessarily have to do foam rolling before the erector spinae. So there's his cardio warm up for his first month of training if he's a stabilization level client, right? So these are the rules you guys want to get memorized. We want to understand what exercises to put in what categories, right? If we're in the stabilization level, you're going to stay in the corrective flexibility tool bag. These are the tools you have access to. These are the numbers that you're going to fill in. And that's how we do it, right? We picked static, static, and static, and SMR. Now, the PowerPoint's going to skip straight to level 3. It's going to go straight to dynamic. Because senior clients actually don't do a lot of active stretching, but I got to teach you guys how to do all of it. So we're going to stray away from the PowerPoint here for 1 second, and we're going to go down to what if our client's in level 2? What if our client has advanced? They're no longer in their first month of training. Let's say they're in their 2nd month, their 3rd month, or their 4th month. Remember, guys, you don't have to do every phase of the OPT. I'm laying it out as a teaching example. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. You probably actually wouldn't do every single phase with a client. Because if you have a client who's working on max strength and power, hypertrophy is not really that important. Endurance, like they're different athletes. You probably wouldn't do every single phase every single time. You got a client who's focused on weight loss, max strength makes no sense. I mean, you can, but it's not helping them with the weight loss. It actually burns the least calories on the whole thing. So, you got a bodybuilder, power is definitely not going to help with that. So, you probably wouldn't actually do all 5 phases of training, but it's a really good teaching example. Let's say you're trying to build like the most general athlete ever. Great, all 5 phases. So if you got a client who's in phase 2, 3, or 4, which all of those are within level 2, you're going to grab a different tool bag this time. We're going to grab the active flexibility tool bag. Now, the tools in that tool bag are self-myofascial release still. So that one exists in all 3 bags, right? But now, instead of static stretches, we're going to do active isolated stretches. Active isolated stretches are where you do a 1 to 2 second hold during the stretching portion, and you're going to do about 5 to 10 repetitions. So let's say I was stretching out my chest, right? Rather than just like stretch that out and then just like hold that 30 seconds, right? Rather than doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to contract and then I'm going to relax. And I'm going to contract and I'm going to relax. And I'm going to contract and I'm going to relax. I'm doing a 1 to 2 second contraction with my antagonist muscles. For my pectoralis major, that's going to be like my posterior deltoid, my rhomboids, all those muscles that pull me back this way. So I'm pulling back on those in order to stretch this, right? So let's say it was my hamstrings. This is always fun because I have to like balance here. But like, you know, what would I do? What's the antagonist to my hamstring? My quadricep, right? So if I contract my quadricep, what happens? My leg kicks forward and I can relax. My leg kicks forward. So what I'm stretching my hamstring by squeezing my quad, right? So I squeeze my quad and I relax. I squeeze my quad and I relax. That's an active isolated stretch. Now, this doesn't use autogenic inhibition, right? We're working on that agonist-antagonist relationship here. That doesn't use autogenic inhibition. This instead uses, we call it reciprocal inhibition, right? One muscle's reciprocating the other one. I squeeze my bicep to stretch my tricep. I squeeze my tricep to relax my bicep. Reciprocal inhibition, right? Why is it inhibition? Well, you know, that's how my nervous system is arranged. My brain knows to tell my triceps to be quiet if I'm contracting my biceps. So we just do it for a couple reps and we're hoping that the right muscle is going to turn on and the wrong muscle is going to turn off. So we go back to this client here, our example of like a feet turn out client, which is lucky for me because some of this is actually on my example list today. Well, if I'm trying to stretch my lateral gastrocnemius through active flexibility, this one here, what do? I contract the antagonist muscle. That's going to be my anterior tibialis. What if I'm trying to stretch my soleus? Well, that's also the anterior tibialis, right? And what if it's my biceps femoris? That's my quadriceps. So I contract the antagonist muscle to these 3 muscles here in the hopes that it will get these muscles to turn off, right? So if I'm trying to stretch out my lateral gastrocnemius, it's going to be kind of weird, but like, you know, again, what do? Well, I just dorsiflex. Right? I go 1, 2, and I relax. 1, 2, and I relax. Now, I do need to make sure that I'm actually drawing it through a full range of motion. Like when I was standing there just now, is that a deep enough stretch? Probably not. You know, I probably need to use like a tool and actually like, you know, do this a little bit better. But you know what I could do? I could very easily, and I actually can't demo this because I don't have anything to do it on, but I could do this right here. There we go. Where to go? It's an animated one. I wish I didn't have to use so many like drawing pictures. But here, I could step on top of a box and drop my heel below that box. And that takes me into dorsiflexion. I contract. Meanwhile, while I'm stretching, I'm not just passively sitting there. I'm contracting that anterior tibialis muscle on the other side of the joint. So I contract that while I'm doing this, right? Or I could go here. That's a soleus stretch, right? Knee is bent, right? But most importantly, dorsiflexion here. But he's not just passively, you know, sitting there, right? He is creating length. We'll put the overactive muscle in red here, stretching this way, but he is, with his underactive muscle, actively contracting this way, right? he is contracting that anterior tibialis muscle while he is trying to stretch out that gastrocnemius and soleus muscle back here. That's active flexibility. So he contracts for 1 to 2 seconds and then relaxes. 1 to 2 seconds and then relaxes. That is our active flexibility acute variables. So active flexibility utilizes reciprocal inhibition instead to actively contract and relax muscles, which should hopefully increase your range of motion. So we SMR first. That's still autogenic inhibition. That's still what we start with. And then we do active isolated stretches whenever we are in level 2, phases 2, 3, or 4. That's a 1 to 2 second hold, 5 to 10 reps. Okay. So let's look at our example workout here. Let's take a look at Bob. Here's Bob's month 1. It was all the static stretches. He's got tight calves and tight hip flexors and a tight low back. So now I go into month 2. That's phase 2. Take a look here, right? February 1st. He's in phase 2 now, which means he's in the strength level because phase 2, 3, and 4 are in the strength level. So now he's still going to do SMR exactly the same. I didn't change that at all. SMR, calves and hip flexors, 1 set, 30 seconds each. SMR, calves, hip flexors, 1 set, 30 seconds. That's the same. But over here, he's now doing, instead of a static calf stretch, he's doing an active calf stretch. Instead of a static hip flexor stretch, doing an active hip flexor stretch. Instead of a static erector spinae stretch, he's doing an active erector spinae stretch. 8 repetitions each for 2 sets. And then the coaching tip, I'm going to say 1 to 2 second hold each rep. So I'm going to remind Bob to hold the rep for only 1 to 2 seconds at a time. Now, why do we have these different techniques? Like, why not just keep doing static stretches? Well, remember how I said static stretches reduce your strength, or at least they reduce your max strength, right? Active stretches don't. And because I'm in the strength level now, I'm going to be lifting at a higher percentage of my 1 rep max, 80%, 90%, maybe even 100%, right? In any of those phases, I'm going to be lifting heavier. So I need a different flexibility technique so I'm not taking away from my strength training. I need to do active stretches so that I don't reduce my strength. So when I get to the gym floor, I can still lift plenty heavy. And I can't do that if I do static stretches because it'll turn the muscles off. So this is why we have this different technique. This is why we're taking the time to kind of relax the correct muscles here. So Bob's still working on his calves, hip flexors, and low back. He's still stretching those out even a month later. But now we're doing a different technique so that we don't take away from the heavier strength training that we'll do later in that workout. So if your client's in phase 2, 3, or 4, if they're in the strength level, we are going to grab our active flexibility toolbox instead. Lastly, let's take a look at dynamic stretches. So what if Bob's in his, what if he's in the power level, right? Level 3 here. Well, again, we need to grab a different toolbox. So this time, we're going to grab our functional flexibility tool bag. Functional is like NASM's way of saying like athletic, right? Power level is the peak. This, you should have built a very strong foundation getting up to the power level, so now your client is really like already quite strong because they've already gone through the strength level. They're already very stable because they've already been the stabilization level. We can do some peak training here. So we are going to be lifting at really high velocities. Now it's like I'm kind of switching what I'm going to use my flexibility for. Now, instead of just like turning my muscles off, I'm kind of trying to get my muscles turned on. Like we had static stretches to turn tight muscles off. We had active stretches to also turn tight muscles off, but while also not, shutting everything down, right? Well, now we've got dynamic stretches, which I don't know, if we're looking at like being explosive because we're in the power level, I kind of want everything firing as hard as possible. So this is where we're going to see functional flexibility come in. This is flexibility training that utilizes dynamic movements, things like body weight squats. Squatting now counts as a stretch, not as a strength exercise. That's fun. Through all planes of motion to actively stretch and warm up your muscles. So you might see something like this. Let's take a look at like the inchworm.
I'm not gonna laugh.
Hush. I don't know who you are, but hush. Skip. So we take a look at this right here. Skipping to the part where she does it. So she's going to start here and then walk her hands out, right? That's a pretty good hamstring stretch already. Now she's utilizing her core. She's stretching out her lat a little bit. And then she's going to walk herself back and further get into this big, deep hamstring stretch. This is called an inchworm. And yeah, that's a pretty friggin' advanced hamstring stretch, if you ask me, right? Or what about like a walking lateral lunge? You know, that's an adductor stretch. He goes side to side, and he's very dynamic through the whole movement, right? Is it still stretching the muscle through a full range of motion? Yeah, sure. But is it holding for a very long time? Definitely not. Is it, you know, contracting the antagonist muscles? Yeah, a little bit, because it's contracting every muscle. In fact, it's even contracting the muscle that we're stretching. So dynamic stretching is great, but it's really not designed to improve joint range of motion. It's not, at least not in the long term. It's not about fixing immobile problems. If you've got a tight muscle that you need to shut down and get it to be more mobile, an overactive muscle truly, honestly, dynamic stretches are probably the worst tool to use. You might get a little bit of range of motion out of it, but not much, you know? So then why do we even have them? Well, they're very good for other reasons. They're really good at turning our muscles on and getting the whole area nice and warm. Which if I'm going to lift really heavy or really explosively or really athletically, you know what? That's actually great. That is something I want. So it's definitely a different purpose, but still very valuable, right? So now we're still going to start with SMR. We're still going to do a little bit of foam rolling, but we're going to do dynamic stretches afterwards, right? And that's going to help me draw my muscle through like a full range of motion here. So as we're looking at that, on the sheet, right? Here's our functional flexibility. We still start with foam rolling to kind of bust up any scar tissue, get some blood to the area, right? And then on some dynamic stretches, which are going to help keep the muscles turned on throughout my workout. So I'm going to pick somewhere between like 3 and 10 exercises here. And I'm going to pick somewhere between like 10 and 15 repetitions per exercise. So if I look up, let's just see like 10-minute dynamic warm up. Take a look at what a 10-minute dynamic warm up would look at. Skipping forward. So he's stretching. I wouldn't say that that's like the most big long hold. Is this going to make his hamstrings more flexible over like a long time duration of his life? Probably not. You know, but is it a super great way to get the right muscles turned on, you know, as he's like looking into like running? Yeah, I think this is great. You know, it's dynamic. In fact, if anything, it's going to increase the power output of his legs because he's creating all these little stretch shortening cycles and his nervous system is just like firing like crazy. So he's doing like 12 repetitions here of leg swings. Now he's going to go into like a lateral lunge, right? It's getting the adductor stretched out and the adductor goes, ah, and it contracts. Right? It's like, ah, and then it contracts. Ah, and so now you're getting it like fired up. This is actually going to increase activity to our muscles versus static stretches would decrease, right? Here's some A skips. It's a really good one, right? So would you consider this stretching? Maybe not if you were not a personal trainer, right? But we know that there are different stretching techniques out there. There's a really good type of stretching if your client already has gone through the other styles of stretching and they've improved their range of motion. This is great for advanced clients. That is why it's all the way at the top of the OPT model. So our functional flexibility tool bag, our dynamic stretches like we saw in the video, and a little bit of foam rolling first. So an example program for Bob, let's say Bob's in his, now I will say I kind of goofed this up in the past. I actually remember this. I need to change it to month 5. So let's say Bob skips some phases here. Bob's going to go up the staircase like this. He's going to go step 1, step 2. He's going to skip 3 and 4. He's going to go straight to 5. That's why this says month 3 and it says, March 1st, right? But he's in phase 5 here, okay? We'll get into all 5 phases in the program design part when we get to the resistance training part, because then there is a difference between all the other ones. But Bob is still going to SMR his tight calves and his tight hip flexors, right? But now he's going to do some dynamic stretches. He's going to do a heel walk, okay? Now a heel walk, it looks like this. It's kind of a goofy looking exercise, but it's actually a pretty good one. Oh, come on. Go away, NASM. There we go. I know it's kind of goofy looking. To me, a lot of people probably wouldn't call this a stretch, right? But he's stretching out his calf. He's in dorsiflexion. His feet are coming back towards him, right? And then butt kickers. That's going to be a pretty good little quadricep stretch, right? Meanwhile, she's kind of firing up her hamstrings. Hen pecks or scoops. Right, that's not helpful. Maybe it's something like this. Oh, I can't skip. I hate these type of videos. I can't skip forward. And this guy's going to explain for it. There we go. So he takes a step and he scoops, right? Stretching out the hamstrings. Little scoop action. So again, we're working on all the same tight muscles, little spinal rotation, little lunge with a twist for more spinal rotation, right? So he's working on the same muscles that have been tight this entire time, but he's doing dynamic stretches now. So we're gonna pick somewhere between 3 and 10 exercises. We picked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exercises, right? We're gonna do somewhere between 10 and 15 repetitions. We decided to do 10 reps each. We're gonna do 1 to 2 sets. So we did 2 sets for Bob here. And that's sort of what, how we would evolve the same client. So if Julio had really bad arms fall forward, so he's got tight pec muscles, tight pec minor, tight pec major, and tight lats, right? Well, in his first month of training, I might start with static pectoral wall stretches and static ball lat stretches, 2 stretches that are listed in your book. And then the next month of training, I might take him into an active pec wall stretch and an active ball lat stretch. And then finally, I might take him into his 3rd month of training. Let's go into the phase 5, right? I might do like arm circles, and that kind of hits both of them, or arm swings, right? And that hits both of them. And so I moved from static to active to dynamic stretching through like 3 months of training. Now, any questions on any of that before we sort of wrap up this section? How do you guys feel about those exercise selections?
It's hard.
Sure. Yeah, but what do you need help on? Like what's
Well, pretty much, I just want to know, like, first we kind of do the SMR, and then after when we did the SMR, then we decided to what kind of exercise, strains, or any type of workout to give it to the client, right? That's what we have to do first.
The stretches? Yes. Not strength exercises. We're not talking about strength exercises yet. We're just talking about stretches, right?
The stretch, yeah.
Yes.
And so, pretty much it's better that what you said is better to before workout to do the stretch first, and then like a foam rolling stretch or any type of stretch before we start the workout, right?
Always, yes. You're because it's look like it's the top of the sheet, right? Top like if you look at the piece of paper here, it's the first thing
Yes.
we do. We're gonna go in order, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, always SMR, then stretch, right? And then we'll get into a little bit of cardio here in a minute, and then we're gonna go into the rest of this.
Okay.
So you always want to because it doesn't make any sense, right? Let's say you got really tight calves, right? And
Yeah.
I take you over to the squat rack. You walk through the door, we instantly walk over to the squat rack. Your tight calves, I didn't address them. So now you're squatting with bad form the entire workout. And then you rack it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, you know what? We should work on your calves. And then I go stretch you out afterwards. And then all of a sudden I send you home.
Because Brad, it's
Right?
so many athletes, they don't believe on the stretch. I don't know why. Like they just
Here's the thing. That's like that seems true to the naked eye. Actual athlete, no, like they absolutely believe in the stretch. Now you'll
okay.
hear people say you shouldn't stretch. That's people like repeating something that they've heard improperly,
They
right?
do it
Like,
after workout, not before.
yes, but you'll hear, but that's people misinterpreting, right? Actual pro athletes would never not warm up. Warming.
Okay.
Now here's the thing. Like I said, static stretches. What did I say? Static stretches reduce your power output. So you'll see athletes skip static stretching, but you'll never see an athlete skip like, they'll be over there doing this.
Yeah.
That's a stretch.
Okay.
It's not a static stretch, but it is a stretch, right? Like,
Yeah.
again, you'll hear but people don't know the difference. They're like, that's not a stretch. A stretch is this big long hold. So then they go, oh, athletes don't stretch before they work out. And it's like, no, right? Like they don't static stretch, right? Unless they have a really tight muscle, in which case they also, yes, they absolutely do. But like you hear that all the time, and that's a total misinterpretation. That's like me saying I don't know how to read because I don't know how to read Spanish. I don't know how to read Spanish, right? But I do know how to read English, right? Like they're different things. Doesn't mean I can't do it, right? In general, right? Like that's like if just because an athlete may not static stretch because they don't want to turn their muscles off doesn't mean they don't stretch. So when you hear people say that, delete it. You didn't hear it. Like never happened.
Or make sure that they don't do stretch, not static stretch, not like real.
That's a total it's a misinterpretation. That's it's the difference between an elephant and an elephant seal. Two totally different animals. You know what I mean? Just because they sound similar, right?
Okay.
They look nothing. They're nothing alike.
Got it.
So it's we always black and white. Birds fly, fish swim, black and white. We always stretch in our warm up. It just depends on what type of stretch we're doing. Static for new clients who need to fix their tight muscles. Active for strength clients. Dynamic for power clients or athletes.
Dynamic stretch.
Yep. But you should everybody in here, if you guys haven't built like a foundation of static stretching first, you shouldn't be doing dynamics.
But how we know they are in what level?
You always start new clients with stabilization. Start with that. And then as you build experience, you'll know like what to look for. But I mean, for me, it's based on their range of motion. You know what I mean? Like, here's the thing. The teaching examples I'm giving you and what I want you to do when you go out in the world and it's like start your career.
Yeah.
The best way to know is start everybody in stabilization, do a month, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, right? In stabilization, then move into strength, then move into power if they're ready for it, but me, what I do, like the reality is like I build a lot of like blended routines, right? So if I had a client, that I'm doing some heavy strength training with, chances are I'm building mostly a strength routine. So maybe something that looks very much like month 2 here. But if I still know they have like really tight calves, and let's say their hip flexors are no longer a problem, right? Well, then I just do this. And there we go. So now I build a kind of a blended routine. This is the reality of what I do when I train my clients. SMR, static calf stretch, and then active hip flexor and active. And it's like, oh, wait, that doesn't follow, right? You put phase 1 stuff and phase 2 stuff together. Yeah, that's actually how I build routines because I've been doing this for a really long time.
Yeah.
Don't do that in the beginning. In the beginning, paint by numbers. Stay in the stabilization level, then stay in the strength level, stay in the power level. Don't blend them.
Okay.
And that'll be a very easy way. And then once you get better at it and your client's like, I don't know, I always do this like big static stretch and I just feel like I'm not getting anything out of it. How many times have you heard somebody say that in class? They're like, I'm not really getting anything out of this stretch. And I'm like, that's fine. The reason I say that that's fine is because like, yeah, I don't need to work on that with you, but like, we're just doing a teaching example right now. So you do need to know how to do it for somebody else who might need it. If you try to make me stretch my quads, I feel nothing. I have really flexible quadriceps, always have. Probably just because I probably have a really long tendon. So like natural mobility wise, that's something that just, I don't feel anything from. Hip flexor stretches, I don't get a thing, right? But you make me stretch my hamstrings and it's like a nightmare. Mine are really, really, really tight. And that makes sense. Agonist, antagonist, right? So for me, static hamstring stretches are a necessity. If I'm doing heavy deadlift for the power, full power, right? I still do static hamstring stretches. And I know I told you, don't do statics when you're doing power. I break the rules for me because like I know how to do it. And that's why I want you guys to stay so clearly in these rules, because the better you know rules, the better you can manipulate them later. But you have to know them inside, outside, backwards, forwards, up, and down before you ever get to break them. So that's how we're going to approach this. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other questions on that? All righty. So don't bounce at the end range of motion. That leads to a stretch reflex. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Do not bounce. I'm really like annoyed at this right now because I just was stretching somebody like at Frisbee on Saturday. And then like, sure enough, like I saw them like over and I was like, hey, it's not how I tell you how to do that. Don't bounce at the end of your stretches, guys. It honestly tightens your muscle right back up, because what you're doing is you're doing the dynamic approach with a static stretch. That's totally, you're getting the worst of both worlds. Make sure that your client breathes properly. If they don't breathe properly, they're not going to be able to move properly. That's not good. That's only going to lead to blood pressure problems. Cease any activity if there is discomfort. And what we mean by that is like in our senior clients, again, they're going to be kind of stiff sometimes, but the nervous system is a little less active. It slows down as we get older. So they can sometimes draw themselves into a really deep range of motion, and they might like get to a really like painful range of motion. We don't want to do that. We want them to like their training sessions. So just back off a little bit, just reduce. It's like, I don't know. It's like, ugh. If they're making this kind of face while they're stretching, it's like, hey, you know what? Like this should be, you're warming up. You're about to enter the gym. I don't want you to making, if Simon walks in and like his first rep looks like this, I'm like, oh man, no, this is a good time. Like, relax. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want that until, that's an end of the set phase, that's an end of the workout, push yourself, burn it out, the end phase. I don't want that at the beginning, right? So if there's discomfort, if there's pain, we don't want to start with that. And then always have assistance available for balance exercises with senior clients, guys. Most of the time, you'll be right there to like coach them and watch them. But, if they're doing like a, quadricep stretch or something, right? And they're grabbing their foot, standing on one leg, we lose our balance as we get older. So be careful with that. Make sure that they're standing near something that they can hold on to. They'll probably do that naturally. They'll probably seek that out naturally. But we just want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on it. So flexibility is all about improving your muscle extensibility. It's all about improving your posture. And when we improve the extensibility of our muscles, when we loosen up this side of the joint, it allows us to be able to get into tightening this side of the joint later, which we haven't talked about yet. And I know that we want to get into what to strengthen. We do want to talk about this. We're just not there yet. We're going to get there in a couple days. But for now, we got to know how to loosen this up. And that's why we always stretch before our workouts. We don't always static stretch, not always, right? Beginning clients, yeah, we absolutely do static stretches with clients who are not lifting heavy, right? Close that. And yeah, we've got our various different techniques out there. So next thing we're going to look at is cardio. So Marjan, actually, this is a really good sort of analogy that's going to come along with it. A second ago, you were saying but not everybody stretches, right? Not athletes don't stretch before they work out. We see that, right? And it's and I was like, no, that's not true, right? What about what if I said athletes don't jog? Would you say that that's true? If I said
Yes.
athletes don't jog?
Yes. I think they don't jog.
Really?
I mean, for because especially people who do heavy lifting, they don't do that because they breathe. I think they after a while, I don't know why, but they start having trouble breathing.
So here's the thing.
Is that right or wrong?
I would totally disagree. Yeah, no, I think the athletes, let's look at, let's use the example of a pro soccer player, right? Would you say a pro soccer player jogs?
Of course.
Yeah, right. Do they
Yeah.
also sprint?
What was the sprint?
A full hard as you can run, like max effort run.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, soccer, they got to make a big fast break, right?
Yeah.
So soccer players both jog and sprint, correct?
Yes.
Cool. Now, when they're training, do you think that they have days where they train for jogging? And do you think that they have other days where they train for sprinting?
Well,
They have to do both those things, right?
yeah.
So that means they have to train for those things, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Different things on different days, different things to train at different times, right? Same thing that we just talked about with our flexibility. So if they're only training for the jogging's pretty low intensity. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a jog is a slow pace run. It's not like a sprint. You're not you're just kind of clipping along, going at a marginal pace, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's not max effort. So if I'm trying to get my muscles warmed up before that, get the right things turned on, the right things turned off, guess what? I can do like a static stretch because I'm not really sprinting at max effort. But if I were a soccer player going into a game where I'm about to be trying to outrun the guy next to me, and I'm going to be sprinting as hard as I can, trying to run faster than that guy, I don't want to do a big, long static stretch because that's going to turn my muscles off. So what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to do some dynamic stretches, or maybe active, in our example, we'll say dynamic because that's a little clearer. But I probably do that type of stretch. So now let's take a look at how I'm going to train for different types of things on different days, right? When it comes to cardio. Let's talk about getting better at the jog. Let's talk about getting better at the run. And let's talk about getting better at the sprint. Sprinting is max effort. Running is sort of medium effort. Jogging is minimal effort. Or we could consider this like walk, run, sprint, if you want to think of it that way. Or walk, jog, run. I don't know. Whatever language you want to use, is fine. But we're talking about low intensity medium intensity, high intensity, right? 3 different types of things. So today we're going to be looking at cardiorespiratory guidelines, which have a lot of different benefits. We do want to review our FIT principles. I know you guys know the FIT principles because we've already talked about them, but we'll review them really quickly. And then we'll talk about how to program this. So general guidelines, when you're writing a cardio program, you do want to consider those 5 FIT principles, right? FITTE. They're guidelines that kind of help us think of like what we're writing when we're writing a program. You want to think about the frequency. Frequency is how often it's going to happen. Our recommendations for older adults, about 2 to 5 days per week frequency, right? That works pretty well. Me personally, I do 2 days of cardio in addition to like 4 days of strength training. Okay. So I like strength train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and I do cardio on Wednesday and cardio on Saturday, right? So that's sort of my 6-day week. Intensity is the level of demand. Now, obviously, frequency and intensity kind of work against each other. If you have high intensity, you can't have high frequency. You know, it would be terrible if you had to sprint every day. Eventually, something's going to break down. You're going to get hurt. You know what I mean? If you're max effort sprinting every single day, that's a recipe for disaster, you know, because you're just not giving yourself any time to recover. But let's, you know, like me, I'm only doing 2 days of cardio per week. So that means there's at least 2 to 3 days of rest in between those days. So both of my cardio days are very high intensity because my frequency is very low. The time is the duration, the length of time of the activity. We recommend 30 to 60 minutes for older adults. They might not be able to handle that. So instead we can do 8 to 10 minute bouts of exercise a couple times a week if we have to. But length is the time, you know, or I'm sorry, time is the length. You know, we don't want to have high time and high intensity. You can't sprint for a high duration. You know, if you're doing a sprint workout, it should be relatively short. So again, I think I know what you're talking about, like Marjan, when you're like, yeah, you don't see athletes do a lot of cardio. I think you're right. I think you're right about not seeing it. I definitely don't. I definitely disagree that it's not happening though. We just don't see it because it's probably very intense, which means that the duration is very short and the frequency is very low. So a lot of times they're doing a lot in a very little amount of time versus the other clients that we tend to see that do very low intensity for very long duration. I can walk several hours. I can run, you know, I mean, I actually, if I'm doing marathon training, I'm also going to run several hours. But in our example, I can walk for hours. I can run for many minutes or maybe an hour, 1 hour, right? And then I can sprint for a few minutes.
Yeah.
That's the difference. The intensity is different. They all have an inverse relationship. If one goes up, they don't all go up. One goes up, one goes down. This one goes up, this one goes down, right? Type is the mode, you know, if we're talking, and not everybody has to run. You know, it can totally be a spin bike. That's still cardio. It can be swimming. You know, it's still cardio. And then enjoyment factor, the level of pleasure derived from the activity. If the enjoyment factor is really low, well, then, you know, now I agree that nobody does it, you know, like, yeah. Do athletes do cardio? Definitely not if they hate it, right? Do marathoners do cardio? Not if they hate it. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Marathoners are all about cardio. It's like, yeah, because they love this, you know? Cardio is either your favorite or your least favorite thing. You know, so here's what's kind of interesting. Let's look at Simon. I'm going to use you as an example, actually, because I know you coach a lot of like baseball and stuff. What type of cardio do you need to be a good baseball player? Not jogging. Yeah, the game is long, sure, but it's short, very intense sprints. You know, home plate to first base. If you're lucky, home plate to second, third, or, you know, maybe even an inside the park home run. But even that, it's not that long. It's one lap, you know. But for the most part, like, that's the longest you need to train cardio for as a baseball player. There's never any like is an inside the park home run where you have to sprint from first to second, second to third, third to home. Did I get lost there? Oh, I said first to second. Sorry. Home to first, home to first, first to second, second to third, third to home. That is the most cardio distance-wise you will ever have to do as a professional baseball player, right? So when it comes to training for cardio, that's about as much conditioning as we need. So we're going to focus mostly on sprints. However, we do need to build a small foundation below that. So we'll probably start with a little bit of foundational jogging just in the beginning. And then, yeah, for most of the time, we'll probably only focus on sprints after that. Running down a ball, Now, there are a lot of different methods to monitor your intensity. We've got the rating of perceived exertion. That's called the Borg scale, right? We could ask our client how hard they feel the exercise is, right? Ask your client, hey, on a scale of 6 to 20, how hard do you think that is? If they say really freaking hard, I'm dying, right? Whew, all right, my intensity is high. Guess what? My frequency and my time just dropped. And if they're like, you know what? Good, but I feel like I could do this for a while. Great, the intensity is low. Now my frequency and my time can go up. So that's one of them. Or I could use the talk test method, right? So the RPE, the rating of perceived exertion, the Borg scale, it's very subjective. It's based on how your client feels. It's not always going to be perfectly accurate. Your client could be, trying to be all macho and toughing it out, and they're like, no, it's fine. Meanwhile, they're like, like, and it's like, ugh. But ideally, you're trying to get them to be honest with you. But it's based on the sensation, how their heart is sort of feeling, what their respiration rate is. Maybe it can even be based on sweat, although don't let your clients base stuff on sweat. Sweat doesn't mean anything. I know it seems like it's probably, you might, I know it seems like an example of how hard we're working. It's really just an example of how sensitive your body is to heat. Like I'm sweating now. You know what I mean? Like I'll sweat from picking up a book. It doesn't mean I'm working out hard, So don't let your client base it too much on sweat rate. And then just general fatigue, right? It's not bad. I like the RPE scale. It's a good way to communicate with your client and then get pretty familiar with it. We can also use the talk test method. So if we're breaking things into, jog, run, sprint, or walk, run, sprint, or run, 1, 2, 3, right? If we're basing it on like a zone 1 situation, your client should be able to speak pretty comfortably. That's like a walking or a jogging pace, right? It's not high intensity. It's pretty gentle. Then we got zone 2. That is where, okay, like now talking is it's kind of uncomfortable. I'm a little out of breath here, It's like they can still speak, but it's like getting a little bit tougher, right? And then zone 3 is like your client is out of breath. It's like, hey, how was the movie last night? And they're like, or they've like throw up, like that's like full on like sprinting. So now we've got 3 different types of like talking, 3 different major intensities: zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. You can think of that as like, or stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, right? So NASM has, and then actually the other one that I like the most for intensity is a % heart rate max. So let's take a look here. I don't want Paint 3D. And do draw. Come on, take me to Paint. I've never tried to do this before. Nope, that's not what I want. Can I just open it in Paint? Let's do that. Where's my thing? Okay. I just need to delete this, but move this over here. All right, let's just take a look at the cardio by itself. So if we're looking at these stages again, right? We got a client in the stabilization level. Well, we're primarily going to focus on the stabilization approach to cardio, which is what we probably think of when we think of cardio. You know, step one, go for a jog. There is no step two. You know what I mean? Like that's usually what people think of when they think of cardio, right? I imagine what most of you guys are imagining as cardio in your head is getting on an elliptical, getting on a Stairmaster, getting on a bike, getting on a rower, whatever, and just going for 30 minutes, maybe watching TV, you know, listen to a podcast, right? Yeah, that's your sort of general approach to cardio. But again, there's different types of cardio. What about sprinting, right? So we're going to break this into 3 heart rate zones, 3 rating of perceived exertion zones, or 3 like levels of out of breath zones, right? So if we break that into 3 zones, we've got a, you know, if we look at like I knew it. They just never give me the picture I want. I've seen this picture before. I just can never find it. So it looks something like this, right? Ooh, that's horrendously pixelated. Sorry. Killing me, internet. Come on, Google. It'll work. There we go. There's an unpixelated one. Okay. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna copy this and then paste it down here. Cool. So now we can kind of see these 3 different zones. We'll start with this. So as we look at like zone 1, right? So zone 1 is 65 to 75% of your heart rate max. It's not very high, right? Because we can go all the way up to 100% of your heart rate max. Although if you do, you are going to be breathing real hard. So you're probably it's going to be rough, right? So cardio kind of starts, what we consider to be cardio like exercise, kind of starts at around 65% of your heart rate max. Now, if I want to get you to a place where you can jog a pace without getting fully out of breath and having to stop, I want to keep you above 65% to make sure that you are considered like working out. But I want to keep you below 75% because if I get you up to about 75% heart rate max, you're going to start getting out of breath. You're going to start be working so hard that you might run out of breath there, right? And I don't want you to get out of breath because then what that means is that you're going to have to slow down in response. And that's not what I'm going for here, right? So if you have to slow down, you can't keep exercising, you can't keep jogging, and that's not what I want. So we're going to see this as zone 1, okay? Put it over there. So if your client's in the stabilization level, guess what? We are primarily focusing on zone 1. And zone 1 is either going to be 65 to 75% of your heart rate max, or it's going to be an RPE of 12 to 13 on the RPE scale. The rating of perceived exertion scale is 12 to 13. Remember, it's a scale of 6 to 20. Okay. So that's like a 5 or a 6 on the scale of 1 to 10, right? Maybe a 6 to 7, although 7's like pretty high. So there we go. That's what we mean when we say like zone 1. So if our client's in the first stage of training, again, think of them as tool bags, right? My client's in the stabilization level where I start all my clients. I'm grabbing my stage 1 tool bag, right? Just like I grabbed my corrective flexibility tool bag. And the only tool in there is zone 1. That's the only tool. This is a pretty simple phase, right? So I get my client somewhere between 65 and 75% heart rate max, and then they're good to go. You know, that's the entire stage. So let's take a look at our example program. Remember Bob, right? Let's go to Bob here and take a look at how we're going to make Bob do cardio. So we go up to his first month of training here, and his cardio conditioning is going to be, all right, Bob, I want you to get on the treadmill and I want you to walk for 30 minutes. That's a long duration. And I want you somewhere above 65% of your heart rate max. That's the floor. And I want you to below 75% of your heart rate max. That's the ceiling. Now you might be thinking, well, Bob's here to work out. Why not go beyond 75%? The reason why is because he will start to get out of breath above that number, which means he'll have to slow down. I'm trying to build his endurance. I can't build his endurance if he has to stop. If he's running and he's placing his hands on his knees, he's sitting there, right? Now he's not working on endurance. If I'm trying to build endurance, I need him to keep going. This is probably the general cardio you think of in your head. This is the light jog, 30 minutes straight, keep going, right? Marjan, I imagine when I asked you earlier, do athletes do cardio? And you were like, not really, because you don't see professional athletes go for a jog that often, right? I imagine this is what you were thinking of, right?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Totally. You don't think of athletes when you think of this, because athlete, you always see the advanced part of athletic training. What about the years that took them to get, to get to that point? You didn't see any of it. But I promise you, they all started here. This is the beginning. That's why it's phase 1. Now, let's move into phase 2. Let's take a look at the advanced stuff, right? Stage 2 or zone 2, whatever you want to call it. I mean, actually, there is a distinction here. Stage 2 is the stage. It's the tool bag. Zones are the tools within the tool bag. Stage 1 had one tool in it. You open up your bag, zone 1.
Yeah.
Right? Now we've got zone 2, where we're going to go fast. But then what happens when we go fast? We get tired. So we're going to have to slow down. So we're going to recover. And then we're going to go fast. And then we're going to recover. We're going to go fast. We're going to recover. Now we've got 2 tools. We got our recovery tool, which used to be our work tool, right? But that's zone 1. And we've got our work tool now, which is new and beyond what it used to be. So clients in level 2, that's phase 2 or phase 3 or phase 4, they're going to get the stage 2 tool bag. Let's go by my little image here, right? So clients in the strength level, whether that is strength endurance, hypertrophy, or max strength, they're in the strength level. They're going to be doing stage 2. That's zones 1 and 2. The focus here is to move into and out of heart rate zones 1 and 2. So they might start with like a 5 to 10 warm up in zone 1, because again, 5 to 10 minutes, that's, you can do that for 5. It's the low heart rate zone. And then do 1 minute in zone 2, which will get you out of breath. And then you're gonna have to slow down. So you're gonna return to zone 1, let's say 3 minutes. So you do 1 minute at the hard stuff, 3 minutes at the easy stuff. 1 minute at the hard stuff, 3 minutes at the easy stuff. 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3. Right? We're going back and forth. Let me just repeat that cycle. It's interval training. Now you might be thinking, I thought interval training was like full on sprinting. That is high intensity interval training. This is more like medium intensity interval training. Okay. So my client in stage 2, my client in stage 2 is gonna get zone 2. Zone 2, remember our RPE, this is gonna not fit. Remember our RPE scale, right? There's stage 2. So our RPE scale, it's not 12 to 13 anymore, it's 14 to 16. Starting to get pretty intense, right? I would consider that like a 7 or 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, It's 76 to 85% of their heart rate max, which nobody can keep up for a super long time. So then what happens is you get up to 85%, you're starting to get fully out of breath, so then you recover. But rather than stopping, you don't have to stop anymore. Now you can jog because you built a really good foundation the month prior. You built that foundation of endurance first. So now you can recover back in zone 1. So let's go look at Bob. Bob's second month of training. All right. So now Bob's going to do his treadmill walking 1 minute at that 76 to 85 percent of his heart rate max, 76 to 85%. So now he's in zone 2. So Bob's probably going to be out of breath in that minute. In fact, that's probably how I'm going to describe it to Bob. Let's say I'm using a talk test, right? I'm going to say, Bob, what I want you to do is I want you to get on a treadmill today. And we're going to do 5 rounds of 1 minute where you start to get out of breath. I don't want you fully out of breath, but I want you to breathe kind of hard for 1 minute. And then once you're done with that minute, I want you to recover and get fully back into like catch your breath. You should be able to talk completely comfortably, hold a conversation, right? And I want you to hold that for 3 minutes. That's going to be 4 minutes for those two together. 1 minute hard, 3 minutes easy, right? And then I want you to repeat that for 5 rounds. So now I'm having Bob do 20 minutes of cardio, right? 1 minute here, 3 minutes here. That's 4 minutes times 5 sets. So that's 20 minutes of cardio. And basically I'm saying, Bob, I want you out of breath, although not fully, medium out of breath, right? And then I want you to recover for 3 minutes. And then I want you to rinse and repeat. And that's his new cardio. Or I could say, I want you to walk fast for 1 minute, then I want you to walk slow for 3 minutes. Either way, he's still going. If Bob was a little younger and I wasn't doing treadmill walking, right, I'd say, all right, I want you on the treadmill. And I want you to run for 1 minute, and I want you to jog for 3 minutes. I didn't say sprint, I just said run, right? I mean, it's tough, but it's not super tough. So stage 2 introduces interval training. It focuses on further increasing your cardiovascular capabilities, particularly your lactate threshold. We'll talk more about lactate in later classes. But the tool bag has 2 tools in it, right? It's got zones 1 and 2. Zone 1 is now used for recovery, even though it used to be our workout zone. And zone 2 is used as the work. I'm gonna erase some of this. So that is that. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions on stage 2, the stage 2 approach? Oh, I'm right.
Nope.
It's a little bit confusing, but it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, just a little confusing, but it's fine, I
Yeah.
think, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, like it's would you start somebody, like you would start them on a jog, right? And then eventually you would take them to like a run. But you can't just go from like a jog, like nobody just like jumps straight up from being able, they don't go from being able to walk to just being able to run 30 minutes. It's like a friggin', if you were training a baby, right? Like, they just learned how to walk, now maybe you teach them how to like run a little bit, but they can't do it consistently. You're not going to take like a 5-year-old and be like, all right, we're going to go for a run. Let's go do 10 miles, right? You're going to go, all right, let's run. And then, all right, now rest, recover, rest, right? Let's run again. Let's rest, recover, right? You'd slowly until eventually, like, that whole 1 minute on, 3 minutes off thing, right? Like if I put you on a treadmill right now, do you think you could run hard for 30 straight minutes? I know I can't, right? If I'm running hard, right? I can't run hard for 30 minutes. I can run hard for a minute and then I can ease out and kind of catch my breath while I'm on the go for maybe 3 minutes, and then I can run hard again. So it's the interval approach, right? I get into the hard stuff, which makes me get out of breath. So then I recover, right? Let's look at a more extreme example. Let's look at stage 3 here. So if my client's in stage 3, now I'm really getting into the high intensity stuff, right? Now I'm really getting into, I'm not just breathing hard, I am straight up out of breath, right? I'm working as absolutely hard as I'm capable. So if my client is in the power level, right? Here's, an athlete who's full on getting better at peak work capacity, working as hard as possible, right? So they're going to do a blend between zones 1, that's the full recovery, zone 2, which is the medium recovery, and zone 3, which is not recovery, that is full max effort, work here. That's like, I'm dying, because they're working as absolutely hard as they can at this point. So let's take a look at what that means, right? This is only intended for very advanced clients. This is the high intensity, really maxed up. This is an advanced form of cardio training with a very established base and a high lactate threshold. The idea here is that you are enhancing your peak capacity, your full-on sprinting ability. And sprinting does mean, I'm using running as an example, but this could be a rowing machine, it could be swimming, it could be anything, right? But this is where you are fully getting out of breath, right? So what I might do is I might warm up in zone 1, which is not really even working out for me that hard anymore. If I go for a jog, for instance, I don't really feel that intense. And then I might do 2 minutes at zone 2 with like 1 minute in zone 3 and then recover back in zone 2. So it might look something kind of like this, right? I warm up for 5 to 10 minutes. I get into the green, that's a little bit tough. And then I get into the red. I'm like, God, I'm dying. And I drop back into the green to recover. Red, green, red, green, right? So I'm going, here's a much simpler example. Let's look at Bob here. Bob's in his final month of training. So I make Bob do a 30-second sprint. Now, Bob's a senior, so let's forget that Bob's a senior for a second. I make my athlete here do a 30-second sprint at 86 to 95% of his heart rate max. That's zone 3. That is full on working as absolutely hard as he can, right? Really just giving me max effort here. And then I let him try to keep going, but I let him slow down a little bit back into zone 2. That's 76 to 85%. And then fully recover back in zone 1 so that we can do it again. Okay. So I go zone 3, zone 2, zone 1. Or I could flip it. Doesn't really matter. I could flip it around, right? I could start, it's like, I warm up, then I do 1 minute in zone 1, 1 minute in zone 2, and then a 30-second sprint at the end, and then recover. I think that that's way harder, personally. I think that's way harder because you have to push at the end after you're already a little tired. But I could flip it around, as depends on how I want to write my routine. So let's say I put my client, we'll use miles per hour as an example here, right? Let's say I put my client, they do 10 miles per hour on that treadmill. It's a 10.0 for 30 seconds. They drop it to an 8.0 for 1 minute afterwards. They drop it to a 6.0 for 1 minute after that. So by the end of that, like 1 minute at like a 6 pace, they're probably fully recovered. We crank it right back to 10. 10, 8, 6, 10, 8, 6. It's interval training, right? I'm going up with my intensity. I'm coming down with my intensity, right? I'm making waves up and down, right? So I go high, low, right? And that is where my heart rate's getting out of breath, and then I'm recovering, and I'm getting out of breath, and I'm recovering. If you guys have ever, I don't know if anybody's ever done this. There's a company called Orange Theory Fitness. They give you heart rate monitors, and they put your heart rate on the TV, and you can see it. And they tell everybody, hey, we want you in the orange zone, right? It looks like this. If you ever go into an Orange Theory, you guys should go. I think it'd be a great way for you to really experience interval training. It's a brutal workout. But take a look right here. There's a trainer walking around the room. You might end up working in a place like this. There's a trainer walking around the room, and they're telling everybody what heart rate zone they want them to be in. So you see up here on the TV, you can actually see your heart rate. So the trainer might be saying, I want you in the orange zone, right? Let's say green is zone 1, orange is zone 2, red is zone 3. So, if I tell people that I want everybody in the orange zone, I know that these people in green are not working hard enough. So I need them to pick up the pace. And I know these people in red are working too hard. I need them to slow down, right? If I'm trying to build endurance, I want everybody in green. If I'm trying to build medium intensity, I want everybody in orange. If I'm trying to build somebody's sprint ability, I want them all in red. So but nobody can maintain red for long. So what we're probably going to do is we're going to get into red, go back to green, red, green, red, green, or maybe red, orange, green, red, orange, green. Intervals, right? It's making a zigzag. So I'm taking my intensity up and I'm taking my intensity down. If it was a line chart, right? Let's say that this line over here, this is my heart rate max. I can spray heart rate. So my heart rate goes over here. Let's say this is 65 to 75% of the heart rate. We'll put that right here. And we'll say this is 76 to 85%. That's right here. And this is 86 to 95%. We'll put that one right here, right? So if I've got my client, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take their heart rate up, and then I'm going to let them recover. I'm going to take their heart rate back up. I'm going to let them recover. And so it might look like that. And then this is my duration, right? And that's sort of what interval training would really kind of look like, right? By the time I get back to this area here, I should be back. I should have my breath back. And so I'm good to go again. And that's really what that's going to kind of feel like. Okay. And we'll get a chance to practice this, you know, we'll get a chance to kind of look at this next mod and really kind of move through these zones. But that's sort of what that cycle kind of feels like, you know. Now, here's the thing. You might hate the idea of doing all this cardio. The examples I've been using today, I've been using a lot of running, jogging, treadmill examples, spin bike examples. You might hate that. Your client might hate it. That's okay. You know what, guys? You don't have to do cardio equipment to do cardio. You can do weights. What about circuit training, right? What if I were to do a little bit of like circuit training where I do this exercise, then exercise, boop, 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 right? Like if I go through like a circuit, right? So what happens, like if I look at like circuit training, not bad. Not bad either. Come on, internet. There we go. So I'm going to do squats, then push-ups, then jumping jacks, then lunges, then plank, then silence. You know, what do you think's happening to my heart rate in this, right? Chances are, if I look at this, right, my heart rate's going to continue to go. Let's say we'll put zone 1, right? Again, remember, zone 1 is 65 to 75% heart rate max, right? And then over here, I got zone 2. That's 76 to 85% heart rate max. We'll put that in orange. And then I got zone 3. That's 86 to 95% heart rate max. We'll put that in red. Okay, so there's my 3 zones here. You know what's probably happening, right? As I'm here, you know, I'm probably in the green zone. Like I just got done doing my squats. And now I'm into my push-ups, right? I'm probably still in the green zone. So I go through here and I'm green. But now, since I'm not taking any rest, woof, my heart rate's starting to get up a little bit, right? So now I'm maybe getting into the orange zone, right? And I'm really getting into the orange zone here. And now finally at the end of my circuit, I'm in the red zone. And now I get to recover, right? So I go from red, oh, but I'm recovering. I'm feeling better and better and better, right? Until I'm fully back into the green as I take 60 seconds of rest. And now I'm back in the green zone and I can kind of repeat that whole cycle. And that's an alternative approach to cardio, right? I can always do my circuit training instead. If my client hates the treadmill, hates the spin bike, hates the elliptical machine, that's fine. I'll do cardio with strength training. I don't care. I just want to get their cardiorespiratory system to train. So I need to do some version of cardio. And yeah, I can do it with weights. This is why circuit training and group exercise is so popular, right? So maybe my program looks like this. I do 5 to 10 minutes of flexibility training in the beginning. My client walks to the gym. Great. We'll start with 5 to 10 minutes to get them warmed up. My client's got arms fall forward. So I do a little bit of foam rolling for the lats. And then I do some pec stretches and some lat stretches, right? And then I do maybe 5 to 10 minutes of stage 1 cardiorespiratory training just to get their heart rate warmed up a little bit, right? So throw them on the treadmill, 5 minutes, get the heart rate up, they're breathing. Cool. Their body's warm, it's pliable, it's flexible. Let's go, right? Now I do 15 to 20 minutes of circuit training. And maybe I alternate, upper body to lower body. So I put them through this routine right here, right? I mean, this is lower, upper, lower, core. Man, I didn't build this circuit, but it's fine. So I put them through this right here, right? And I do this for, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Then I put them back on the treadmill to kind of ease their heart rate out of it. Just stage 1, being real gentle here, right? And then 5 to 10 minutes of flexibility training. They're cooled down, they're stretched out, the workout's over. I sent them home. And I had a great day of cardio while I still got to do some strength training, So with seniors, just a couple safety guidelines. Don't forget to use your safety clips. Those clips on the treadmill, clip them to your client's clothing. That way, if they ever get too far away, it'll shut the treadmill machine down. They don't go flying off the back. Always advise them not to wear baggy clothing. That's a big one. Give them an orientation on how to use the cardio equipment. Make sure they know how to adjust the numbers properly. And then if you're doing this, just monitor for exhaustion. If your client's really sprinting, clients will be very bad at learning how to control their heart rate. So make sure that they're not getting fully exhausted. You don't want your client in zone 3 when they're trying to be in zone 1, right? That's not going to be good. And always warm up and always cool down. Ease into your cardio. Easing into your cardio, guys, makes it much easier for you to learn how to control your heart rate. This is going to place intensity and demand on the entire bioenergetic continuum. For those of you who don't know what that is, we talk about that in our physiology classes. But remember, aerobic, anaerobic, and ATP-PC even, we're placing energy on all of those systems. Your FIT principles is going to make the programs fun and engaging. And stage training is going to make sure that you're monitoring your exhaustion. You build a foundation of stage 1, then you can take your clients into stage 2, and then you can take them into stage 3. So circuit training can kind of work its way through all those stages, depending on how intense you make the circuit, and then they recover. So this is doing the interval training, right? Again, it looks something kind of like this. Let's make this colorful this time, right? So they're in, stage 1, and then all of a sudden, whoop, now we're into the orange. Whoop, and now I'm into the red. And now I'm back recovering into the orange and recovering into the green. And then I bounce at the bottom. Look at how much longer the green is. We spend most of our time working on the endurance. Why? Because we can do it longer. The orange is exhausting. The green is recovery. So it might look something kind of like this if you think of these as your heart rate zones. What's really frustrating though is my colors are totally not the same over here, which I'm annoyed with. I don't know why NASM decided to call zone 1 yellow. It's like no other company does this. This should be green. And we'll call this orange. And then we can leave that as red. But that's sort of what that's going to look like there. So let's go back to Bob in his 3-month example here. His first month, the only tool in our toolbox, right, is stage 1. We're really just kind of staying in green here for his first month of training. So He's going to stay in on the treadmill 30 minutes, 65 to 75% heart rate max. But then we get him into his interval training, right? We do 1 minute of the hard and 3 minutes easy, right? So 1 minute, 1 minute in the medium hard. So zone 2, 3 minutes recovering in zone 1. And he just bounces back and forth between those two. But then we're going to do 30 seconds in the next month of training, right? We get him into his third month, 30 seconds at 86 to 95% heart rate max. That's intense, right? Then we let him recover just a little bit, but still push hard in zone 2. And then we let him fully recover in zone 1 before we repeat. This is a very advanced style of training. That's really intense. So we really only do it with our power level clients. That's a very advanced form of training. Now, in reality, would Bob advance 1 month at a time here? Probably not. I'm probably going to need to give Bob a lot of cardio training before he ever gets into that zone 3. But in the teaching example, you know, we're taking it from 1 month to the next month to the next month. Any questions on that, guys? Any questions on how these zones work or what they're for, anything like that?
No, sir.
All righty. Guys, that's about it.
Good in here.
Cool. Love that. So we're going to get a chance to practice this stuff. Next mod, we'll have a we'll have a cardio day. But other than that, that is about all I got for you. I know today was a long one. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. It was, you know, two very large chapters today. But hopefully you found it enlightening. And that's the first part of our OPT template. We talked about the warm-up section and we talked about cardio. So we got through a good chunk today. Homework number 2 is up on Canvas, so please knock that out. And I will see you guys tomorrow.